Okay, it's running. Starting the intro. You're on.
Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of the Blasphemers Bible. And we are going to be doing Psalm 22 because I understand some people have some things to say about that. Three things that happened to me today. One, I spent my morning installing dog seat belts in a motorcycle sidecar. But apart from those things, in social media, somebody replies to a comment that I made about there being no God. Somebody says God did this and God did that, and I'm like, no, He doesn't. There is no God. And then somebody just writes out the word Psalm 14:1, and that's their reply. So my reply was the link to when we did Psalm 14. I put in the link to our show, and I put in a timestamp and a brief explanation of how those people should probably watch our show since they don't understand their own Bible. Also, this morning, somebody posted, not just to me, but in general to atheists, that maybe we should invest in a study Bible so that we can follow the Bible studies that they do properly and understand it properly. So I replied that they should watch our Bible study so that they could learn something about it more than their study Bible knows. And it's
I think I might have just responded with Lawrence, but yours was maybe more effective.
Yeah, just at me. No, I the thing is, like, I use a study Bible, the
A good one, I
NRSVUE
bet.
or the SBL study Bible. Yeah, that's what I use, and it's academic, so it's like actually helpful. Like, they're not gonna give me the bullshit of like, this verse is about how you should love your dick or something like that. It's something stupid, you know? Like, it's
That sounds absurd, but this was once a True Love Waits Bible before I duct taped it. So basically, it had all kinds of inserts and talk about how you shouldn't fuck.
I still have my wow. I still have my New Geneva study Bible.
Ooh, Geneva, fancy.
Yeah.
Obviously, this is not the only Bible I possess. I possess dozens of Bibles. My father's Bible, Strong's Exhaustive Concordance, all kinds of things. And
Strong's.
Hey, it's useful. I never said it was
useful. Yes, it is. It is useful
for linguistic cross-reference.
You know, I often complain about books that I've lost over the years. My Strong's Concordance is not one of them that I lost it, but I never find myself going, God damn.
I wish I had Strong's Concordance.
You've never needed to flatten something, maybe something got wet and you needed to press it, because Strong's is great for that. Also can be used as a weapon.
How many times in my life as an activist, people have referred me to read Strong's Concordance?
It's not a thing you read.
It's a reference tool.
Yeah,
it's a reference
they refer
tool
to it, and they advise me.
But you don't sit down and read through all the words. It's like saying read the dictionary.
Yeah,
I get it. But it doesn't seem to be that you have the opinion, and anybody here has the opinion of Strong's Concordance that the apologists that I'm talking to did.
Right. Oh, they do love it. Yeah,
they do.
I'll say that it was, to my understanding, because like I definitely like use concordances, but that's usually not strong. It's not Strong's, but like the to my understanding, it was good for its time. But that's my understanding.
Concordances can be useful. I have one of my mentors. There's a whole long story behind this, but it's a fascinating story. In the 1970s and the 80s, there was a lot of frustration among scholars at the slow pace of publication for the Dead Sea Scrolls, particularly from Cave 4, which is where most of them came from. And one of my mentors, Marty Abegg, as a grad student, got his hands on a concordance that was made by the scholars working on the material, handwritten on recipe cards, and used it to reconstruct the texts on his own. So, that's
I mean,
something
that's
that you
that's some dedication right there.
yeah, yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. It's a pretty remarkable achievement, and it's a great story.
Yeah.
But I digress.
Yeah,
So
you know what? We got just to actually put things in motion for the show today. We have Psalm 22 today, at the very least. We'll be starting with Psalm 22.
I feel
And
like we already did a show on this.
well, the
Done
thing is,
several shows on
we didn't. But actually, hold on. There is a one thing we'll get to beforehand. But first, let me just talk a little bit about Psalm 22. We will hear a lot more about Psalm 22 as we get into the New Testament. We're gonna be we're gonna be reading a lot more about Psalm 22. So this is
Riding that pony into the ground.
yeah. They really, because like this is probably the most important psalm for Christianity. Like you
Yeah.
have like it was literally used to construct the fucking passion narrative. So it is absolutely important. And
Lawrence, you know
we
what's
will
more
be
important?
referencing back to what's more important.
That we should start with some commentary on Psalm
That's what I was
21.
gonna say. Oh, my
Oh!
God, Peter, you're just stealing my thunder, taking the wind from my sails.
As I always
fuck
do.
you.
As I always
Tober,
do.
you have some commentary on Psalm 21 that we were not able to hear last week. So we would like to start off the show by talking about your commentary, and then we can actually hop into and read Psalm 22.
Yeah, sure. So this is what I wrote for Psalms 21. I finished this last Monday. So Gerstenberger writes that on the surface, Psalms 21 seems to be an authentic thanksgiving prayer for a king, augmented by further well wishes for his future. He writes that if we take verse 14b with its first-person plural verbs to indicate a group of royal clergy, then the speaker could be a professional liturgist of the court. Kraus writes that Psalms 21 appears to be composed of several liturgical elements, including a thanksgiving song, a prophetic proclamation of salvation, bidding prayer, and a vow of praise. This suggests a cultic or ritual setting for the psalm, though the exact setting of it is unclear. Earlier scholars viewed the psalm as a historical song of victory, quote-unquote, but ever since Dom, who assigned the psalm to the Hasmonean era, the dominant view is that Psalms 21 belongs to the ritual of the royal court in Jerusalem, or in specific terms, quote, anniversary celebration of enthronement, end quote. Gunkel also suggested a royal festival, and Weiser argued that the psalm reflects a coronation ritual. Because of similarities with Psalms 2, Kraus suggested that the psalm may belong to a royal Zion festival, and is likely a cultic celebration connected with kingship. He notes, however, that Movinkel proposed that Psalms 21 is a, quote, liturgy for the day of prayer before the king's departure of war, end quote. He concludes that Psalms 21 may be assigned to the time of the Judaic kingdom. This view is taken by Terrien, who writes that it'll make sense for the psalm to have been written during the time of Josiah's coronation, but writes that Psalms 21 needed to be interpreted eschatologically. Quote, the anointed one began to be viewed as the Messiah at the end of time, end quote. Craigie also suggests that the psalm is a royal liturgy, though its exact social or ritual setting is unclear. The language of the psalm does not suggest a single specific military event, since it indicates both past victories and the prospect of future triumphs. He writes that the psalm has a strong covenantal dimension, and thus suggests that the psalm was used in a royal ceremony connected with a Davidic tradition, likely an anniversary or renewal of a king's coronation. Such a ceremony would recall past victories and anticipate future triumphs, due to the king's trust in the Lord of the Covenant in verse 8. The references to the king's crown in verse 4 and splendor in verse 6 indicate a distinctly regal occasion. He concludes, quote, "Although precise information on the setting cannot be ascertained, the psalm should be interpreted with respect to its initial sense as a liturgy utilized in a royal ceremony associated in some fashion with the commemoration of a coronation," end quote.
Did you say there was something there written by Tyrion?
Tyrion, yes, Samuel Tyrion.
Was that when he was Hand of the King?
No,
I don't
no.
understand anything. I don't
It's
understand the references.
Tyrion, not Tyrion. Tyrion would worship me, for I am the god of tits and wine.
I mean,
Although at the
honestly,
moment I'm drinking coffee.
honestly, I don't really like Tyrion's commentary on Psalms, which is why I've suggested adding. I started adding 2 more commentaries because I felt like the lack of substance to his commentary, and also Gerstenberger kinda, his commentary is good, but it's not on depth for some verses. So I've also added John Goldingay's commentary on Psalms and the NICOT commentary, which I forgot who the writers are. Just a second. So it's Nancy L. de Clayse Walford, Rolf Jacobson, and Beth Laniel Tanner.
I think it's fair to point out.
By Clayse Walford.
Oh, yeah?
Sorry, that's apropos of nothing.
I think it's fair to point out that this is thought to be liturgical psalm, which means that the thing for which it ultimately became habitually used for may not have been what it was initially designed for. But we've said that a lot of these would have served ritual purposes and not necessarily have been all that deep in that sense. You know, the affirmation of the power of the king, of the covenant with God. These are very ritualistic, traditional things, and I think that's completely valid to understand. But at the same time, it's not precisely unique in the Psalms. That's kind of what most of this book is about.
Did you have any more on that psalm, Tomir?
No, that's it.
Okay, are we moving to 22 now?
Mhm.
Okay. And I seem to have a title in this. I'm reading the King James, but it includes a title in bold, which there was a title last time, but it wasn't in bold, and I'm a little confused at the inconsistency here. But it says, "For the director of music, to the tune of The Doe in the Morning, a Psalm of David."
Cool.
I don't know the song, The Doe in the Morning.
Yeah, no, it's unclear. I mean, the sentence, the phrase is Ayelet HaShachar, which literally reads the doe of the dawn, and it's usually like taken either as an instrument or like a tune for a specific poem or something. But it's not clear. Again, like the rest of all the superscriptions in Psalms, it's not clear.
And then because I'm reading an English translation, probably not going to be the same thing.
No.
At some point, this was clearly a known tune, but yeah, that's all we know.
Okay, I will begin then. My God, why have you forsaken me? Why are you so far from saving me, so far from my cries of anguish? My God, I cry out by day, but you do not answer, by night, but I find no rest. Yet you are enthroned as the Holy One. You are the one Israel praises. In you, our ancestors put their trust. They trusted and you delivered them. To you, they cried out and were saved. In you they trusted and were not put to shame. But I am a worm and not a man, scorned by people, despised by the people. All those who see me mock me. They hurl insults, shaking their heads. He trusts in the Lord, they say. Let the Lord rescue him. Let him deliver him, since he delights in him. Yet you brought me out of the womb. You made me trust in you, even at my mother's breast. From birth I was cast on you. From my mother's womb you have been my God. Do not be far from me, for trouble is near, and there is no one to help. Many bulls surround me, strong bulls of Bashan encircle me, roaring lions that they tear their prey. Open their mouths wide against me. I am poured out like water, and all my bones are out of joint. My heart has turned to wax. It is melted within me. My mouth is dried up like a potsherd, and my tongue sticks to the roof of my mouth. You lay me in the dust of death. Dogs surround me. A pack of villains encircles me. They pierce my hands and my feet. All my bones are on display. People stare and gloat over me. They divide my clothes among them and cast lots for my garment. But you, Lord, do not be far from me. You are my strength. Come quickly to help me. Deliver me from the sword, my precious life from the power of the dogs. Rescue me from the mouth of the lions. Save me from the horns of the wild oxen. I will declare your name to my people. In the assembly I will praise you. You who fear the Lord, praise him. All you descendants of Jacob, honor him. Revere him, all you descendants of Israel. For he has not despised or scorned the suffering of the afflicted one. He has not hidden his face from him, but has listened to his cry for help. From you comes the theme of my praise and the great assembly before those who fear you. I will fulfill my vows. The poor will eat and be satisfied. Those who will seek the Lord will praise him. May your hearts live forever. All the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord. All the families of the nations will bow down before him. For dominion belongs to the Lord, and he rules over the nations. All the rich of the earth will feast and worship. All who go down to the dust will kneel before him. Those who cannot keep themselves alive, prosperity will serve him. Future generations will be told about the Lord. They will proclaim his righteousness, declaring to a people yet unborn, he has done it.
So, all right. There's
I
a lot
detected a
there.
prophecy in there. Can you guess where?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So much.
I just want to say I agree with Elira that whoever wrote this deserves the title Drama King.
Oh yeah.
I
Super
was
dramatic.
going to say I quite liked the cadence of your reading, Aaron. That was especially the dripping sarcasm at the beginning. I think was on point.
Thank you.
It was very
So-
appropriate.
Yeah, I saw Tomer's reaction when we got to the they pierced my hands and feet part. We'll talk about that.
Before we get to that, I just want to say one little thing
I
about the
pictured-
first few verses. When it says, "In you our fathers put their trust, and they trusted you and you delivered them." It just instantly made me flash back to Colonel Ingersoll when he said that the Old Testament is a record of how God made many, many promises to his people, and he didn't keep a one of them. Not one. He betrayed them on all counts, broke every promise he ever made. And it's like, yeah, don't trust the people who continuously fail you. Believe people when they tell you who they are.
Yeah. This goddess is very, very unreliable. He always forgets about his people, which is why sometimes he'd be like, "And God remembered his people," And it was always very funny reading that.
Oh,
because
right,
it's like,
them.
oh, that's right.
Oh,
Those
fuck.
guys.
It's
I
very
need
funny.
my glasses. It's the
But I have I mean, I do have quite a bit on this, so I'll go through it. I'll go through what I have. I guess we'll take turns, I suppose. Oh, there's the cat messing with shit again. Okay. Yeah, you can meow all you want, buddy. You already ate. All right. So, firstly, I did mention that this psalm was used for the construction of the Passion narrative, especially. And the thing is, even conservative Christian scholars don't really like that fact. They still, I think they still believe that it is prophetic, but they also make sure that you know that there's no evidence that it's meant to be prophetic. So Ben Witherington III, pretty conservative Christian scholar, says there is no evidence as of yet that Psalm 22 was seen as messianic in character prior to the time of Jesus. And this is a pretty conservative Christian guy saying that. And he still argues for how Jesus used it in a messianic way, but he acknowledges that it was not used that way. It was used to construct this narrative.
Yeah.
So
Um,
sorry, go ahead, Tomer.
yes. Kraus also notes that. Um, so he notes also that the New Testament it is frequently quoted in the Passion narrative, and he writes that from these references of the Passion narrative to Psalms 22, earlier churchly interpretations permitted themselves to conclude that Psalms 22 belongs to the messianic prophecies, but this interpretation has been proven to be inappropriate. Psalms 22 does not deal with the Messiah in the sense of an end-time king of salvation. Psalms 22 is not a prophecy, quote-unquote. In this sense, H. Gunkel, for instance, could state, quote, the messianic, quote-unquote, interpretation, last represented by Delitzsch, has conclusively been dropped since it was recognized that the psalm actually contains no prophecy, and what is more, that the idea of a suffering Messiah is foreign to the Old Testament, end quote. This statement reflects an understanding that turns up almost everywhere in the more recent exegesis of the Psalms. Thus, A. Cohen in the Sonkino books of the Bible comes to this conclusion, quote, a Christological intention has long been read into this psalm, but modern Christian exegetes are agreed that it describes a situation then existing and does not anticipate an event of the future, end quote.
Yeah, agreed. So there were a few things that I wanted to hit on that I'm sure like Kip specifically was like, I need to be here for Psalm 22. So I'm sure he has a lot of stuff to say. And I'm sure he's going to correct me on a whole bunch of stuff too. But you know what? I'm going to say it anyways. Damn you, Kip. Damn you to hell. What I found, this is the stuff that I found interesting that kind of caught my eye. So in verse 4 there about the delivery, it could refer to quite a few things, but it probably refers to the Exodus, tradition, which I think probably started sometime in the 8th century, maybe the 7th century. So it's interesting that like at the time that this is being written, they have already tied that link back to they already have like the whole Moses narrative in there, say like, oh, these are our ancestors. They kind of have that tied in together at this point. Ton, sorry, he's meowing about something. I thought like there's like a high ledge, and usually when one of my cats jumps onto it, the other one starts meowing because he's too fat and can't get up there. So I was like checking to see if the other cat was up there. He's not. So I don't know what this guy's complaining about. Sorry. So the where was I? Right. So I also have here verses 6 through 8, where this was also definitely seen as part of the Christian tradition in quite a few ways, where the big part though is that like people scorn at the psalmist, and they mock him, and that is absolutely used in the Passion narrative. That's one of like I'm sure we've heard that quoted a million times, right? Do you guys remember that verse of like, in the end times there will be scoffers or shit like that? Like, I'm sure you've.
No, because I've never read the New Testament because it's not part of the Bible.
Okay,
Uh,
well,
well-
it's actually the real Bible, Tomer.
I've seen it in the comments of our videos, which I found incredibly amusing because apparently God was waiting for us to come along because we are special snowflakes. And yeah, Hitch wouldn't bring about the end of the world, but we do. Huzzah.
Right.
But
yeah.
there's a negative confirmation bias going on here. But there's something that is, God, I could write a book on this if I could write several. It's something about the sanctity of suffering. And it's not that suffering is in and of itself good, but that one of the things that religion has done for people, particularly people who are facing unavoidable suffering, is to create a sacred narrative around it, which can then become a problem because then if you sanctify the suffering, then people seek the suffering for the sanctity, and it becomes this desperately unhealthy thing. But initially, saying our suffering has purpose, our suffering has meaning, it is for a higher purpose, that held people together in dark and desperate times and gave them the strength to go on. And you can see a little element of this. And I think there is some argument to be made. I look forward to hearing more on this from the panel, that elements of the Jewish faith at various times have included the element of our suffering is a part of the greater spiritual narrative of the world and has a purpose in that sense. The specifics I will defer to the experts on, but I can observe elements of it here. And I think it's interesting to see the ways in which it's sprouted off. So I can't wait to hear what Tomer has to say about they pierced my hands and my feet, because the mistranslation on that is a whole episode in and of itself.
Well, yeah.
I mean,
we'll get there.
actually, for this reason, I know, because Keep has done a much more extensive research on this phrase. So I just didn't write anything about this. But I'll just note that, like, the Hebrew is ka'ari, yatai v'raglai, when ka'ari is usually understood to mean lion. So if read literally, means like lions, my hands and feet, all right, my hands and feet are
singular,
like
though.
lion, or something like that. But I think the meaning, however, is that my hands and feet are mauled like lions. Sorry, like lions.
Yeah, that's definitely an option.
There are
lions
lions chasing this person and nipping at their heels, so to speak, and possibly grabbing them.
However, go on. Sorry.
Yeah. There was a because I did read through quite a few things. Right there, it's been translated in a lot of ways. That's a great scorpion, Arn.
Wow.
Thank you.
So, I will get there in obviously a few verses.
Not at all terrifying.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Where was I? Right. So in verse 10, this I want to actually hear the panel's thoughts on this. So in verse 10, yes, since my mother bore me, you have been my God. So obviously, like, it could be hyperbolic language for, like, I believed in you my whole life, right? But could this also be a reference to having been like a child dedicated to temple service? Like, because like
Absolutely.
in Numbers 3,
Wait a minute.
like that's just something. That's just a possibility. Like, I didn't
Why
like.
are you
general
always
phrase,
going
maybe.
with the child cannibalism, Lawrence? You're concerning me.
Fair enough. Yeah. But like, we know that like some people were dedicated to temple service, especially if they're Levites. So like that's why that thought popped into my head. I don't know if
Uh,
anyone else has made that connection.
I mean,
or
I'm
not.
I'm looking at Duro's child sacrifice, and it doesn't seem like it. It doesn't mention this psalm specifically. Actually, it does mention Psalms 22 verse 26. However, but like I need to see the context of
It's a
what that is.
common enough theme, though, in both the hero's narrative for a prophet, in the case of a priest, or in the case of a king if he is born knowing the idea that the divine blessing rests on someone, that they have a divine destiny, that they have belonged to God from the beginning, either because they were dedicated as a child, because God, in the case of, say, Samuel, interfered so that he could be born to an otherwise barren woman, and then he's dedicated and belongs to God from his infancy. It can be somewhat poetic. Job, the narrative talks about, you knit me together in my mother's womb and all this stuff. It's intended to reflect, I think, a sense of belonging and connection to the deity from the very beginning. But it would be reflected in some of the religious practices. Certainly, think of circumcision, dedicating the child to God, going forward. Joining the religious community in that sense. So it's not an unusual connection to make. There's many contexts where that would be an appropriate thing to say.
Yeah, I don't know. Does anyone else have thoughts on what I said there? Kip, I saw you have a scoffing look. Must be the end times.
I just I'm not sure. Just because it's
I mean, it's
the
just me
the
looking at
verb
something.
itself, right? I mean, the verb itself, I don't recognize as something that I would have to look into it a little bit more. Yeah, as something that you see used of others in the context of like the ritual service of the temple. And also I mean I think too there's yeah, it's just there's so much that we just don't know about what this looked like in antiquity too. It's an interesting idea though.
Yeah, that was just the first thing I thought of. I was like, oh, maybe it's like Levitical, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I think about
either
that
way,
some more
I
now.
will. But thank you for your insight. The next one that I found kind of interesting.
I'm gonna get some
So yeah,
coffee.
verses 12 through 13, especially though the bulls of Bashan surrounding the psalmist. And he used that animal imagery a lot, which we're gonna get to once we talk about the piercing verse. So yeah, the bulls or cows of Bashan are pretty typical enemies of Israel. Like that's how they spoke about some of their enemies. I should say that. Um, they were found east of the Sea of Galilee in Transjordan. Like the actual bulls, like the area was known for strong cattle breeds. But Amos 4:1, for example, says, "Hear this word, you cows of Bashan, who are on Mount Samaria, who oppress the poor, who crush the needy."
What are we talking about here? Are these like Cape Buffalo or are these aurochs? What are they?
It'd be closer to aurochs, yeah. So and then yes, here's I don't have like a long commentary for this section of verses, but it is important, so I feel like I have to talk about it. Yeah, so dogs encircling him. The NRSV UE chooses bound his hands and feet.
Yeah,
And then
Kraus also has bound.
right,
They
yeah,
bind,
yeah.
quote unquote, my hand and foot.
Yeah.
But that
and-
doesn't
and-
comport with interpreting it as being nailed to a cross.
Well, the thing is, I'll get to the cross in a second.
Yeah.
But the in the casting lots, also a lot of stuff that was used for Jesus. Shocker.
Yes.
So obviously the casting lots is used in every single in every passion narrative. But yeah, so verse 16 there, pierced. It's a conjectural translation.
Yeah.
Now Murphy says that it's better than the Masoretic text, like a lion. The Septuagint uses dug or gouged.
Nets has gouged as well. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that would make sense. I don't think the verse itself is actually quoted in the New Testament, but it was definitely in the mind of the gospel authors. But they did
Do
cite
you think so?
I,
Because this is it, right?
they do
I
quote
do
Psalm
not
22.
believe that the gospel writers knew this translation, this particular Horaksan. I don't
Yes.
think they knew this.
Yes,
They-
I
they-
also,
they
Because
definitely-
and I'll tell you, I mean, if the writer of the Gospel of Matthew had this translation available to him when he
would've
was
used
writing the Passion narrative, he would have used it.
He would have cited it, yes.
If there
But
were early
he
Christian
cite-
writers, like you don't see this until I think it's like late 2nd century before Christian writers are starting to actually connect this part of Psalm 22 to the Passion narrative.
They absolutely used and cited Psalm 22 as like
100%.
Yeah.
It's this particular rendering though,
yeah.
because that's the issue here is we have it's a textual corruption. Virtually every scholar agrees that verse 16, verse 17 in the English and the Hebrew is a problem. What has survived was not likely original. If you're going with the Masoretic text, most likely there's a problem with a verb that's been lost,
Yeah.
or maybe
I have a note on that specific one.
yeah.
But the thing is, since the lion imagery is used in multiple places in the psalm,
Yep.
I could totally understand the reading as like lions, they surrounded my hands and my feet, or like lions, they encompassed, or something like that, right?
Mauled or something like
But
that.
the I know that Craigie
Or
translates
piercing with the goring of the bull's horns.
Well,
To
sure,
be part
yeah.
of the broader imagery, not necessarily the translation of that specific word, but the broader imagery.
I'll just say
Yeah,
I think
sure.
I think pierced is just not there at all.
No, I agree. Pierced isn't there.
Even in the
Yeah, but
so
the
I was
It's
just going to say
beginning
I
to
read
sound to me like you're saying that this isn't a prophecy about Jesus.
shocker.
crazy,
Yeah.
right?
Um,
I was going to mention I read I wish I could remember it just goes to show you I need to write a lot of these things down more often, but one of the articles, and to be clear, there have been hundreds of academic articles written just about this particular
yeah.
section, right? Just so much. One of the
Yeah.
ones I'd like to say it was Brent Strawn's article, but he focused on iconography from Mesopotamia, from like Assyrian and Babylonian reliefs, where interestingly enough, in imagery of lion attacks, the victim's hands would be like detached and lying like sitting in front of like the lion, the attacking lion, which I thought was kind of cool, and maybe that's the way to connect what's happening in this psalm.
Well, if you're first in line, then you'll get in sooner.
funny, you funny guy, Aaron.
So yeah, wait, I wanted to so as you noted, like Tanner notes that there are no less than 10 monographs and countless attempts in commentaries to untangle the meaning of 22:16. So she notes that where was it? The recent readings of 5-6 Hevel Psalms by Peter Flint reflect the Septuagint with Ka'aro. Based on this evidence, this reading must be seriously considered. However, as noted by Brent A. Strawn, the fragment is very faded, and Y and Yud and Vav are quite similar. In addition, he notes that the Septuagint may not be following the same Hebrew Folage as the Masoretic text. J.J.M. Roberts suggests that kara also be understood as a verb, but from Akkadian and Syriac cognates with the meaning of be short or be shriveled. Thus, the NRSV's meaning of my hands and feet have shriveled.
Interesting. I did have a note here from Craigie. He does translate it as "my hands and my feet were exhausted."
Yes.
And he takes the reconstruction of the text that suggests there was like a single letter that was changed in the word, like a lamed for a resh.
Kalo. Yes, kalo instead of
Yeah.
kalo.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I
so
believe it's there was an article published in Vedas Testamentum in I want to say 2022, 21 or 22 by it's either Victor Flowers or Vincent Flowers. He actually does stuff on YouTube. But he's pretty conservative, very apologetic type of scholar nonetheless. But the nice thing about his article is that he actually cataloged every single suggestion for the textual corruption. I think he came up with like 20, 21, 22, 23 suggestions by scholars as to what has happened in the textual history of this particular part of the
Yeah.
song.
I mean,
glad he's got a
yes.
catalog for it.
Oh, it's available. It's but sorry, Tomer, I was just going to say you can
Yes.
it's freely downloadable too. You can just grab it from his academia page.
Yeah, there is also Tanner notes that there is an article by James Linville called Psalm 2270b, a new guess in JBO 124 2005, pages 733 through 44, which have the complex history of the interpretation of this verse. There is also a suggestion by Gerstenberger that these verses are corrupt, and he writes that a corrupted text in verses 16 and 17 gave rise to speculations, especially in regard to prefigurations of the life and death of Christ. In reality, the psalmist talks only about the tortures of the afflicted who were seeking the help of Yahweh. So yeah. He notes that the conjectured "my hands and feet are bound together" points to some mistreatment.
Right. Yeah. Definitely some kind of mistreatment. So I mean, some of the stuff I just noted for me later because like I want to do some stuff on this. The designation there of like in verse 23, sons of Jacob to designate Israel. Now trust me, I know why, right? Like I get that they're the same person, Israel and Jacob. But like I still wanted to note the designation. So in verse 24, I also found interesting because the affliction of the afflicted. So like diseases usually were a reason to stay away from someone, but God's like he actively engages with those that are quote unquote diseased. But in this context, like considering the amount of pain and potentially physical assault the psalmist has experienced, he might be thinking of like also a spiritual affliction or sin, right? So like just as like the sin of Israel was like not worshiping God properly and thereby justifying the exile, the sins here would be overlooked by God.
And those were not necessarily distinct. There's a long history that we've discussed all along the scripture of saying that, our corruption, our sin caused this affliction, this disease, this famine, this war, this
Right.
enslavement. So, this might have been what caused it, or we have done this sin and we are at risk of this horrible tragedy. In this narrative of David, quite directly, he is chased out of his home by his rebelling son as a direct consequence of God judging him for his sins. Also, his people are killed by a plague, but that's like for 3 days.
There was one more big thing I want to hit on. So in verses 27 through 28, yes, okay. So yeah, all the ends of the earth shall remember and turn to the Lord. So the phrase, I think, is it Apse Aretz?
Afsei Aretz.
Afse. That's what I thought. So yeah, Afse Aretz. But so it probably comes
28?
from The
28 in the Masoretic text. I think
right.
it's 27 in the Old Testament. Yes, 27 in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
So annoying.
The phrase early Afse, right? Probably comes from the Akkadian Apsu, which was meant to talk about the waters at the ends of the earth, right? That was another being. You have the salt waters, the chaos waters of Tiamat, and then you have the fresh waters of the Apsu. But it eventually became a generic word for end or extremity, because they were literally thought to be like around the earth, like the world encircling ocean, right? And Wyatt notes that its actual usage clearly preserves the overtones of its source, retaining a cosmological nuance. So I do always like bringing that kind of stuff up when I get a chance. But that is the extent of my commentary there.
Right. Should we talk about talk about the manuscripts? I feel like we need to talk about the manuscripts.
I feel like we do need to, yeah.
And Peter Flint a little bit. So, and I'd like, because I brought pictures. So Peter, if you could share my screen,
we can't.
I know Peter generally likes the files being sent directly to him.
Oh my God, I should have. Oh shit. Well, this is no good. Can I send them?
You could email them.
Yeah, you can email them.
It's a keynote presentation, unfortunately.
All right, tell you what. Kip, while you send those and while Peter gets those ready, Tomer.
So I don't even know if it'll work. It's a keynote. Would that even work? Would you be able to? Could you handle a keynote? Because you'd have to operate the slides then, wouldn't you? Oh, hey, look at that.
Yeah,
there we go.
Perfect. Yeah,
okay, he's got it.
That's not going to work.
What?
That's not going to work because I can't. I don't have a scene to put that on screen on YouTube. And there is no way to add it to the panel as such.
Well, this is wow. That's frustrating.
Could we have Kip replace his face with the keynote and then make him big?
I wonder if I could do that.
Yeah, Kip, can you share your screen and then have Peter share Kip or highlight Kip?
I have my screen shared now.
Yeah, but that's not going to work in the way the show is set up. I'm streaming through OBS, not through StreamYard. So sharing in StreamYard won't work.
OBS people. Yeah, shit.
Damn it.
This is frustrating because now what else could I do? Oh, this is so annoying. Because I was actually going to.
Do I need specific software to open it?
It's Keynote, so it's a Mac program.
Oh, yeah. I don't have that.
I do have a suggestion. So you have a lot of manuscripts in there, right? Like, do you have pictures of manuscripts?
Pictures of a couple, yeah.
Okay.
So the one, the problem is that one of the things that I do is play with play with images to make them clearer so that you can see things. So there are pictures that aren't publicly available. Some of these are mine so it's I don't know if you can't handle a keynote. Wonder if I could if I could just move a bunch of this stuff over to Google Slides quickly.
Just some more questions and I'm just trying to suggest a few things. So you have pictures of these things. Do you have like the edited photos as well?
What do you the ones that I made?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. Okay, so the thing is, what you could potentially do.
I could do this.
Is if you send over to Peter all of the the original, all the ones that you want to present.
You know what? I have an idea. Yeah, I could send it. I
including-
could just send it as like as like a PDF document. Even would work.
Sure, yeah, just like you can tell them to go to like the next
I
slide or something.
think I've got a
Try
better.
that. Yeah.
I think I've got a better way. Dr.
Right.
Kip, if
I
you
should have
can,
checked on this before.
no problem. Hold on. If you join the link that's in the private chat now, and then make sure that you mute your microphone before you join,
Hi, Isaac.
and then present your screen there, and then I'll bring that into the show. Sounds a little weird, but it'll work.
So I have to mute my microphone first, join the link. You'll put it on
No.
stage. At that point, then do I?
Join the link and then mute in the StreamYard version. You go in there
Oh yeah.
and
yeah,
then
okay.
share your
All right.
screen.
Okay, let's try this. Okay, so I'm just. Yeah. All right. And then share
There
my
we go.
screen.
Yep.
Perfect. Nice. Yeah, this is better. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for working on the fly with this. Look at that. Can people see this?
Not
now?
yet. Not yet.
yet?
I'll have to
Okay.
pull it in
okay,
a scene.
while Peter sets that up, Tomer, we can do your commentary, and then we'll hop to Kip for the main event.
Okay, so an overview. So Gerstenberger takes Psalms 22 to be a true complaint of the individual, and that there are no real signs of royal origin. He writes that the final interpretation, verses 27 through 31, which is 28 through 32 in the Masoretic text, presupposed late post-exilic life and theology. He suggests that the psalm served for cases of extreme and prolonged suffering. Kraus notes that some of the interpretations of the speaker of Psalms 22. While traditionally the psalm is attributed to David, this is considered inappropriate. At first, it was thought that the singer was an ordinary member of the Old Testament community, quote unquote, but this was contested by advocates of the royal ideology, like Wittengren and Benson, who argued that the psalm reflects the dying king in the cultic ritual, and the thanking person, quote unquote, in verses 22 through 31, would be the reviving ruler in the worship drama. Kraus, however, favors seeing the psalm as portraying a typical or archetypal sufferer of Israel. Quote, "The petitioner of Psalm 22 is weighed down with a variety of afflictions. The archetypal affliction of abandonment by God is at the root of all individual statements. The tendency to deal in types is unmistakable. Like the poor man, so also the sufferer in Israel has become an archetypal figure that in its complaints and petitions participates in a covenantal complex of language and conceptualization." End quote. Still, he notes that the psalm reflects a specific crisis. The speaker appears to be physically disfigured by a severe sickness, surrounded by the demons of sickness and enemies, and experiences fever and expects imminent death. Thus, quote, "Psalms 22 is the outstanding example of the Old Testament way of speaking about sickness and death," end quote. He concludes, quote, "There can be no doubt that at various times different petitioners have left their mark on this lament and prayer. Especially in the final verses, the psalm shows traces of expansion and new formulations. It is therefore hardly possible to set a date of origin. Finally, in an explanation of the setting, we should also call attention to verses 22 and 25. The petitioner and singer presents his lament and thanksgiving betoch kahal, in the midst of the congregation, or bekahal rav, in the great congregation. Accordingly, he has obviously appeared during a great festival and has intoned his psalm in the court of the temple. Very likely the psalm was sung at a meal associated with an offering to which the poor were invited and assembled, in verse 26, end quote. And Craigie comments, quote, "The words of the lament imply the worshipper's deep state of distress prior to the liturgy. Although in their original composition, the words presumably indicated the particular experience of a particular person, in the normal use of the liturgy, they are simply words spoken by individuals, whose personal circumstances may have differed. Consequently, it is difficult to determine the precise purpose and setting of the liturgy. In all probability, the liturgy was used for those persons who were severely sick and threatened by death. They practiced in the liturgy in the context of the community as a whole, who gathered as a congregation in the temple. In participating in such a liturgy, the worshipper hoped for a priestly oracle favorable to his plea, which would enable the great declaration of confidence in verse 22c. In the concluding portion of the ritual, the worshipper would fulfill his vows in verse 26, both through offering praise to God and through participating in the sacrificial feast in verse 27. It is probable that a liturgy such as this was used for any person who was sick and threatened with death, though it is possible to interpret the liturgy as a royal ritual. The evidence for such a view, however, is at best indirect, and the royal hypothesis must remain uncertain. Now on the title, which is 1, to the tune of the doe of the morning, quote unquote, the Masoretic texts read Al Ayelet Hashachar. The word Ayelet in the Old Testament generally refers to a hind or a doe, but Septuagint, Symmachus, and Targum read Eyalut, which means strength or help. Craigie writes that if this is the correct reading, then the expression in the psalm title might be taken as an indication of the content of the psalm which follows. Gordon-Gay writes that dawn is the moment when help may arrive, or the moment when one offers prayer and praise. He notes that the Midrash plays with both understandings, hind and help, partly in applying the psalm systematically to the situation of Esther. Some traditionals, like Rashi and Kimchi, took Ayelet HaShachar to be a type of instrument, with Hameiri explaining that it was called Ayelet HaShachar because its voice rises as time moves on. Gerstenberger suggested that the title may point to an animal sacrifice before dawn, according to Movinkel, to a mode of musical presentation, according to Gunkel and Beckrich, Jirku and Terrien, to the proper time of ritual, according to Delicat, or to some other cultic feature. Jirku also suggested that the deer is associated with the sun god based on archaeological data from Anatolia, and thus the original title was associated with the sun god Shachar, also known from Ugaritic texts. On one which is 2, my God, why have you forsaken me? Golden-Gay notes that the talk of Yahweh's abandoning the worshipper contrasts with the many expressions in Psalms of conviction that Yahweh does not do that, as we see in 9:10, which is 11, 27, 9 and 10, 37, 25, and 33, etc. It compares with the declaration of the enemies that Yahweh has done so in 71:11. He writes that the succeeding lines of the psalm make it clear that we should not infer that the suppliant would be satisfied if this why question were answered. The question is rhetorical and implies, you should not have abandoned me, and I appeal to you to come back now.
Can we maybe it's worthwhile, because this is most people recognize this particular text via the New Testament, because this is the
Yes.
and correct me if I'm wrong, Lawrence, but I'm fairly sure that the Lama or sorry, Eloi Eloi Lama Sabachthani is I think that's recorded by all four, isn't it? All four gospels.
I think it's all four.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's
think from
interesting to
memory, yeah.
me, right?
I
that
was
it's
looking and
that
found it in Mark and Matthew. I would assume it's in the Synoptic. I haven't verified that it's in the fourth.
yeah, maybe
Yeah,
not, John.
honestly,
but,
they kind of blend together. So like going off memory, I think
they
so.
shouldn't, but
Yeah.
but I think I do think it's interesting that it's widely attested in the gospel tradition, and that it's Aramaic. There's I've often thought that there's a ring of, I hate saying things like this, but I often think that there's a ring of truth to this, as something that happened, that the and part of the reason for that is because of the fact that the gospel writers are citing this in Aramaic, as opposed to the Hebrew text. But
No,
Yeah.
I'm looking now. No, it is not in John.
Oh, it's just Mark.
Not, no, it's
and
not
Matthew
in the
then.
fourth
Is
gospel.
it-
It's just in Mark
is
and
it Luke
thus
too?
in the synoptic.
Yeah.
I will say it's not uncommon for, as I understand it, for a Jewish person facing suffering or death to quote a psalm like this. But the one that John takes from, well, the fourth
Why does
gospel,
the
we all know
verse
John
interest say
didn't
it's
write
not
it.
Aramaic?
Yeah.
He takes
Matthew and
the
Mark, yeah.
dividing lots
Hmm.
from.
So you're saying that in the Greek version of the New Testament, they quote,
Which is the only
saying-
version.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
I mean,
actually
like,
it's actually transliterated into the Greek, the
translated rather
Aramaic.
than translated.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah, they
the
do that
Aramaic
for a lot of
version of
stuff.
this verse. How different
Yeah.
is it from the Hebrew? So instead of
It's
like a completely different
Eloi. Yeah, but they're very similar. So it's
usually in
Eloi,
Aramaic, that's
Eloi,
Eloi
Lama.
instead of Eli.
Yeah,
Lama, yes.
Lama,
Yeah.
Sabachthani instead
Oh,
of
Sabachthani rather than
Azabtani.
Azabtani. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Subhanallah.
So
That's funny.
yeah.
But which could be like, as you were saying, that maybe Jesus actually quoted it. Is that what you're saying?
Or that there was I mean, I don't even think you have to go that far. I think it's enough to say that there was probably like just a very, very early Christian tradition that was functional in their liturgy and their traditions and everything was functional in Aramaic, in Jerusalem, right? Like yeah. So, but no, those sorts of things interest me.
Yeah.
Fair
It's
enough.
interesting though, because you would
I'm sorry,
assume that
Tomer.
like, if Jesus did say it, a Jewish person at that time, even if they spoke Aramaic as their first tongue, if they wanted to quote a psalm, they would quote the Hebrew psalm, not the translation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I have everything set up in case you want to show.
Oh, that's
your
cool.
slide.
Do we want to get through Tomer's commentary?
I think that would make sense because
17 first.
Yeah, well, I think getting through Tomer's commentary would make sense. I don't want to hop back from Tomer's commentary to your thing and then
Sure.
back and forth. So
well, let's do that.
Though I do see some comments. Maybe Aaron wants to read.
Okay, then. Yeah, that's right. We've been backed up on these. So, shut up, Matt. Did we read this one? No.
No.
I thought it started with this. Yep. So, shut up, Matt says, Aaron, did that Mormon you did the interview with have any idea the powerhouse he was up against? That guy was a Mormon?
no, he wasn't a Mormon. You guys were just making fun of Mormons for a little bit.
I mean,
Okay.
I wish Mormons were real though. So
Yeah.
They're a fairy
He
tale,
seems to
like
come across
elves.
as like one of those Christians that don't think Catholics are real Christians. He was like, "Oh, I wasn't a Christian before," or something like that.
In response to that, I have to comment on what Lawrence said earlier this morning. He described that video as I didn't know what he was first talking about when he said he watched a Christian walk into a wood chipper.
Head first.
For a split second there, I was like, literally? Oh my God. And I was like, oh, okay, no. Okay.
He
never
promised he
mind.
was going to get back to me, and he hasn't.
They never do.
They never fucking do. Every single time you already show that you know more about the text than they do, they never get back to you. It's so frustrating. Like, why am I learning all this stuff?
I think it was more literally
Just
a
run
pit of
away!
vipers. No? What did you have on the table with you?
Oh, I had tarantulas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Bit different.
And I knew I was going to have to explain that when I had to do the intro. That why are there tubs full of spider web and dirt? So I had to explain that. But anyway, Alira the Free sent 50 RN Raw gift memberships.
Damn, girl.
Huge.
Yep, and then
huge.
Huge. And then BMW.95 says, my question, at what point does it stop being religion and becomes mythology? For example, Norse mythology, Roman, Greek, Egyptian, Sumerian, etc.
It was always mythology.
I was gonna say, I
Like,
don't
It's
understand the question.
acknowledged as
That's-
mythology when people admit that it was never literally the case.
No, that's the thing though. Like, people treat mythology like it's a 4-letter word. Like, it's not a bad word. Like, it's
It-
not
nothing
meant
myth
to
is
be
a 4-letter
derogatory.
word.
It's not meant to be derogatory.
The understanding of the word mythology does not necessarily insist that it must be false.
Well, it's not like every like there's a mythology to like to most like ideologies that have been around for a long time. Like there is like in modern times like a difference between like a cult and a religion, but like all religions were cults back then, and that wasn't treated like it was like a terrible like this, oh my god, this terrible thing, that's a cult. Like they're like
Yeah.
that's just the thing that we do in our little community.
Like
Like
like a sect within a religion was a cult in a sense.
well,
You-
that
you
can
have
also
your
apply.
stories, you have the rhythm of your life that grows from, the land you're in. And those stories, a lot of them probably started at mother's knee with, nighttime stories and, oh, the sky was angry. But then the mighty bow of the hunter, like these, it's very poetic. And you can contain fiction doesn't tell what literally happened. It tells what a people's values are, what their fears are, what their hopes and dreams and goals are, what they desire most, what they fear most. These are the things that are preserved in fiction, and specifically and explicitly in mythology. This is deeply valuable to understanding the human condition. It's just not a goddamn history textbook.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
I don't think those two words.
And it's important to remember that all the stuff that he listed there is like Norse mythology or whatever, Roman mythology. You could still like if you're talking about the actual practice of those things, you can still refer to it as Norse religion, Roman religion, Greek religion.
Yeah.
You can still do that. That's still fine. It's not like there's like this transition period. It's
A
like
religion can have a mythology,
it's
but it
like
doesn't necessarily have to.
right, yeah.
There
and
are
the
still,
and I just
amazingly, there are
I-
still Hellenists and Asatru.
right, yeah. And I just want to point this out. This is very similar. Like that kind of thinking is very similar to when creationists go like, well, when does it go from theory to fact? Like that's not how it works. So like that's how that comment comes off.
I think I can explain what happened, because philosophers have long observed that the myths of the gods are regarded by the simple as true, by the wise, by the scholarly as false, and by the political as useful. But in the age of science, particularly, when we started breaking things down less in how they felt and the narratives and more in just real practical divisi of the world, we started getting results that religion had always promised us and never ever delivered. And that's when it became a threat. And that's when they started insisting, no, it's literally true. Literally. Because if it's not, then it loses the power. And that was simply not the way humans thought for the vast majority of our history.
So it didn't become that other translation until somebody said, "Yeah, I'm aware of the story, but the story isn't true." And then somebody else had to squawk, "But yes, it is."
Mm-hmm. Insecurity. Always the enemy of truth.
Can I continue?
Oh, please.
Okay. So on 3 through 5, which is 4 through 6, Tanner comments, quote, verses 3 through 5 are an abrupt about face. First, God's lofty position compounds the distance from the one crying out. God is sitting on or enthroned on Israel's praises. Does that mean there is no room for cries or abandonment? Or is this a title of honor offered as a sincere act of praise? The next two verses rely on the verb trust, which appears 3 times. The ancestors trusted and were heard and were not ashamed. Is the purpose of this section sarcastic, as suggested by McCann, or is this truly an about-face with memories of God's acts for the people in the past, a basis to trust now, as argued by Limburg? Miller notes, I think rightly, it is both. Crying out in pain and expressing trust are not incompatible. Faith and trust ebb and surge in life, and the appearance of contrasting situations causes a clash in the one suffering. I know what I feel and I know what I believe. The prayer clearly demonstrates the emotional roller coaster of the suffering of a faithful one.
So I just want to say that when the option is available to interpret something as sarcastic, that's 100% I'm going there every single time. So just
Okay, on 6 through 8, which is 7 through 9, Kraus comments, quote, in verse 6, which is 7, the lamenter points to the fact that his life has been dislocated and that human honor has been trodden underfoot, according to C. Westermann. Lo ish means to say, I have lost every semblance of humanness. Compare Isaiah 52:14 and 53:3. I am like the worm that creeps along in the dust. For this picture, compare Job 25:6 and Isaiah 41:14. But immediately the enemies attack this humiliated and disfigured man. Scorn and ridicule attempt to put their seal on the humiliation and to separate the sufferer from God. Yani'ei Rosh denotes a gesture of derision, as seen in Psalms 44:14, which is 15, and 64:8, which is 9. The mocking advice of the enemies is then quoted in the lament. Let him put his distress into the hands of Yahweh. May he save him from his hopeless situation, for he is obviously well disposed to him. This mocking suggestion carries with it the accessory notion. May Yahweh help him who boasts concerning himself that Yahweh takes delight in him. Chafetz hints at a declaratory act. On 9 and 10, which is 10 through 11, Goldingay notes that the suppliant certainly knows that birth is a natural, quote-unquote, process, but also sees that at another level it comes about because Yahweh makes it happen. This is not merely by the way Yahweh created humanity at the beginning, as if matters then proceed by inbuilt processes, but because of the way Yahweh is involved in the individual birth. Kraus suggests that in these declarations of the petitioner, we are reminded of royal prerogatives as they are given by the adoption of the ruler to be the Son of God. He writes, however, that we cannot use this observation as a reason for assigning Psalms 22 to the royal cult. Rather, the petitioner, in his words of trust, adopts conceptions from the king's language of well-being. On verse 11, which is 12, Gerstenberger writes that, surprisingly, Psalms 22 does not end after verse 11. Rather, the petition of verse 12a opens a new, rather serious and lengthy complaint, as we see in verse 12 through 19, that prepares for the petition of verses 20 through 21. He asks if this whole section is a later accretion, I think, and did the psalm grow during its long history of ritual use. He writes that regardless, the passing petition of verse 12a creates a firm link with verses 2 through 11. And Craigie comments, quote, in such desperate straits, the psalmist is compelled to move from lament to prayer. The substance of the prayer illustrates the true nature of his condition. There is no explicit prayer for healing or deliverance from death, though such may be implied. The prayer begins with a request for the removal of the divine distance. Feeling forsaken by God, the worshipper asks that God be no longer distant. While it is true that the sense of distance would disappear in an act of healing, there is something more immediate in the desire of this prayer. More than anything else, the worshipper requires to know once again the intimate presence of God. If such presence brought with it healing, so much the better. But even if it did not, sickness and death could be faced squarely in the presence of God, who would be a helper. On 12, which is 13, Kraus writes that the animal imagery of verse 12, which is 13, where the sufferer is surrounded by beasts, functions a metaphorical language, describing the petitioner's affliction. Gonkel wrote that such comparisons were not meant to be insults in ancient literature, but rather portray powerful, eminent people whose wrath is fearful. Thus, Gonkel took the beasts here to be the powerful and imminent enemies of the individual, quote unquote. Kraus writes that while it is a fact that the raging of hostile people can be described by means of metaphors referring to animals, as we see in 7.2, 10.9 forward, 27.2, 35.21 forward, we should note that these enemies in the Laments always represent demonic powers that separate from God. Ancient Near Eastern traditions, especially in Mesopotamian exorcistic texts, often depict harmful supernatural powers in animal forms. For example, in an exorcism of the demon Samana, we may encounter, quote, a neural exorcism. Samana, he of the lion's muzzle, he of the dragon's tooth, he of the eagle's claws, he of the scorpion's stinger, Enlil's wild lion, Enlin's lion who cuts off the throat, the lion of Ninisina with the maw dripping blood, the lion of the gods with mouth wide open, end quote. On 14 and 15, which is 15 and 16, these verses were taken by some scholars as indicating sickness. For example, Kraus writes that these verses describe, quote, the passing and dissolution of the body in the heat of the fever, end quote. However, Craigie writes that these verses describe the fear evoked by enemies who are waiting and watching for death to come. He notes that the sufferer feels as if poured out like water, quote unquote, and as if all his bones were disjointed. Though not yet dead, he felt already that he had been deposited in death's dust. The phrase, you deposited me, tishbeteni, implies that the psalmist understood God to have set him in this mortal predicament. So, although it is the derisory enemies that surround him, it is God who is at the roto of his dilemma. And Tanner comments, quote, the next two verses, 14 and 15, described in detail the physicality of fear. The point where you feel as if your body has become like water flowing away, joints become harder to hold in place, joined with that hollow feeling in the chest as finally the mouth dries up. This is the way fear impacts not just the brain, but the whole self. The last line of verse 15 states, you set me down in the dust of death. Who is the you here? The last you was God in verses 9 through 11. And most commentators read it as God here also, and this may very well be the case. This would then echo the problem with God that began the prayer. The enemies are vexing, but the center of this one's distress is the feeling of separation from God to the point that here God is seen as actively participating in this one's suffering. Finally, however, the you is undetermined. It is probably God, but without the clear indication, all the possibilities remain open. On 17 through 18, which is 18 through 19, Tanner notes that like the previous section, these verses move from the circling of enemies to the feelings of the ones surrounded. Several commentators like Kraus and Clifford note that this means that the one praying has been stripped so that this one's bones are showing. She notes, however, that the Hebrew etzem can have a much broader meaning, such as the seat of emotions or even the whole self. In addition, the verb is clearly in a PL form here that usually indicates a recounting or telling. So it is just as possible that the line is, I can recount all my feelings, roughly equivalent of recounting one's life or taking stock, end quote. On 19 through 21, which is 20 through 22, Gerstenberger comments, quote, the final petition again addresses Yahweh directly. There is a negated jussive and a series of imperatives, all of which seek to induce Yahweh to save the afflicted. The last word of verse 22 is under debate, however. The Masoretic text reads, you have answered me. The parallelism of verses 21 and 22 would suggest another vocalization of the consonants anitani as noun, aniyati, my poor one, i.e. my poor life. The arguments pro and con usually reflect only the interpreter's prior position regarding the so-called salvation oracle. If there was a formal answer to the supplicant within the prayer ritual, whenever the text shifts suddenly from complaint to thanksgiving, this response did not necessarily involve a cultic prophet or a high-level priest. Compare Psalms 12. The officiant at a small-scale group worship was certainly able to communicate to the supplicant a liturgical and nevertheless divine answer to his plea. End quote. On 25, which is 26, Golden Gate takes verse 25, which is 26, as concluding the personal section of the psalm, rather than introducing what follows. The verse forms a closing statement about the suppliant's own experience and response to God's anticipated deliverance. He writes that the suppliant's praise originates in God, meaning that God's saving action is the thing that deserves praise. The suppliant speaks of this act as future, as it is. On the other hand, the worshipper responds with acts of gratitude, publicly expressed in the great congregation among those who revere Yahweh. He notes that praise in Israelite worship was not merely verbal, and one may assume that thanksgiving was routinely accompanied by a thank offering, as we see in 50, 40 through 15, 65, 1 and 2, which is 2 and 3. The word neder, which EVV takes as vow, should be understood as praise, since vow suggests something more legal and legalistic than a neder need be. And finally, 27 through 31, which is 28 through 32, Gerstenberger writes that these verses are eschatological, if not apocalyptic in nature, and writes that it is very probable that this part is a final accretion and reinterpretation to the text. Craigie, however, writes that it is unnecessary to suppose that the last section is not an integral part of the original psalm. He notes that there is a move away from the individual perspective of the earlier portion of the liturgy to a more cosmic perspective. He writes, however, that it is entirely appropriate. It sets the particular event of deliverance into a broader and more balanced perspective, and yet it is still related intimately to the earlier liturgy. Tanner writes that while the last three verses are very problematic textually, and any exact translation is tentative, what is clear is that all will praise God because of this. And all of God's acts go even beyond the nations that one can see in the present. Both the healthy and the robust ones will praise along with those nearing the grave, and beyond all of them, the story will grow and go on to new generations, to those yet unborn. That's it.
All right.
All right.
Is
Now
it,
time for the main event for
picture
Big
time?
Dick Kip to give us the deep the deep dong on Psalm 22.
Oh boy. Okay.
Gonna
Oh,
Hey,
ram it into
look, there it is. So, now I find that the best, because one of the things that you'll continue to hear from Christian apologists, and this is an idea and a narrative that was forwarded and popularized by one of my own mentors while I was in graduate school, Peter Flint, who did the academic work on this. He's the one who published these manuscripts from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and he forwarded this idea that within the Dead Sea Scrolls there is validation for the Septuagint reading of Psalm 17. They pierced my hands and my feet, as opposed to the Masoretic reading, like a lion, my hands and my feet. And if you've spent any amount of time dealing with Christian apologists, especially, one of the things that you discover is that they love this talking point a lot. What I find is people don't fully understand it, and I like to
Doc-
walk people
Dr. Kip,
through. Yes,
are you showing slides? Because
hello.
we're still on the first one.
It's Yeah, I haven't started yet.
Oh, okay.
I haven't.
Just making sure.
So, well, yep. No, it's good. Thank you. So I like to walk people through what these manuscripts actually look like, because I think it provides a clearer sense of really how flimsy some of these arguments are. So there are two manuscripts in the Dead Sea Scrolls that preserve this critical part of the text in verse 17. The first one here, and this is a picture you should all see on your screen now. is 4Q88. It's a really scrappy little fragment from the manuscript. Those who can read Hebrew will recognize right away that the handwriting's not great. It's highly cursive. Now, the verse in question, the text
Even
in
the name of
question,
it is highly cursive. 4Q.
4Q. You know,
Sorry.
most of most of the manuscripts from the Dead Sea Scrolls are 4Q. They
We
are.
should, for people that don't know, so from Qumran there were 11 caves, right? I think, and the depending on what cave they came out of, they're going to be listed as like 1Q, 2Q, 3Q, 4Q, right?
Mhm.
So on and so forth. And
Thank
then
you for
the
that.
number afterwards is the order in which they came out. So
Sort of. The numbering is more complicated, and when you understand the
Okay.
catalog system, it's actually pretty easy to navigate your way through what's in the collection. Like I can look at a manuscript number without actually knowing the manuscript and have a good idea of what's in it. So just simply, the lower numbers in a cave are all biblical manuscripts, and then
I
anything
see.
after that is non-biblical. So this is 4Q88. That gives you an idea, right? There's at least 87 manuscripts from Cave 4 that contain biblical texts. So this is 4Q88. And the verse in question, the reading in question, is on the bottom line there. So we have here, we've got oh yeah, I forgot to mention this. There's actually two fragments that belong to this. Can you push the image up a little bit, Peter? Because it's cutting off the bottom, or is
Sure.
that it?
Hold on.
So there's like these two little fragments, and okay. But that's, yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's much better. Thank you. Appreciate it. So, these two fragments are going to help us fill out what's missing in this bottom line. Of course, we don't have a good sense exactly on where that second fragment belongs respective to the first fragment, and that's also going to affect the way we read this. So we're fairly certain about this word. This is Hikifni, and this is actually a textual variant as well from the Masoretic text. In the Masoretic text, it's Hikifuni. They surrounded, no, the dog surrounded me. What is it? It's evil ones encircled me. So it's this is a singular verb as opposed to the plural verb. And we're fairly certain that this is there. The tops of the letters are relatively easy to see, but the critical word in this passage is this one. Is it ka'ari, like a lion, or is it karu, they dug? And all we have left of that word is like these three little ink traces. So how do you reconstruct a word based on that? There's some I mean, it's not impossible, right? And the editors of this fragment have suggested that it's this kof resh vav karu, and it fits relatively well. But again, I'm going to point out that all we have are these tiny little ink traces sitting at the bottom of the fragment. It's, in my opinion, a relatively flimsy reconstruction, especially since, you can also, just by shifting that fragment over a little bit, reconstruct ka'ari, using the same Hebrew text. So I don't think this fragment helps a great deal in determining what the reading here was. I also like to point out that if you go with the slightly longer reading here, ka'ari, which means like a lion. You also end up with a fairly nice division or a join between these two fragments. That there seems to be breakage along the same vertical plane here, which is also something that we see fairly consistently within many of the Dead Sea Scrolls fragments. So that's 4Q88. The one that people talk about the most, however, is this one here, which is the Nachal Hever Psalm Scroll. So this is a manuscript that came from a different cave other than Qumran, in a place called Nachal Hever, and this is a later manuscript as well. This is probably 2nd century, so early 2nd century AD. So after the destruction of the temple, I believe this manuscript is dated to the Bar Kokhba revolt, so like the 130s AD. Oh, geez, my chain just fell off. Oh, but I'm off screen.
Do we have a date? Do we have a date for the Qumran 4 cave?
Oh,
Or
yeah.
scroll?
So that one's earlier. It's like 1st century BC. Maybe even late 2nd century BC, probably 1st century BC though. Also, that manuscript, the first one, is not a complete collection of psalms either. It's just a handful of psalms. And you'll know, it's hard to see on that one too, but they're all in these tight little narrow columns, structured. So this here was probably a complete Psalms manuscript or a very, very large Psalms manuscript. The fragment where Psalm 22 verses I think it's 15 through 7 through 15, no, it's like 16 through 18 or 19, where that particular text appears is that bottom fragment that you see. And looking at it, I think everybody can already tell that it's hard to read. The text on it is not clear, unlike the other fragments that you have here. And I'm gonna zoom in. First of all, I'm gonna show you this. This is the official edition of this particular manuscript, and the way that the editors have seen the text on this particular fragment is here. And this is also fairly interesting because they've introduced another textual variant. For those who can read Hebrew, you see Kof Aleph Resh Vav, not Kof Aleph Resh Yod. Kof Aleph Resh Yod is Ka'ari, like a lion. Kof Aleph Resh Vav is actually not a word that we know of. The suggestion is that this is a lengthened spelling of Kof Resh Vav Karu, which means they dug. But beside it, you have Yadiyah instead of Yadi, which would be her hands, not my hands, and my feet. So the reading here would be evil ones encircle me, they pierced her hands and my feet. It's interesting to me that the editors transcribed this but offered no comment at all on that particular variant. So yeah.
I do have a
Now-
quick question here.
Yeah, sure.
So is that the text you just showed? Is that what is thought to be on this particular manuscript, the Nachal Hever one?
Yes, this is
Okay,
the Nachal
gotcha.
Hever scroll.
Okay.
So yeah, okay. So that's the reading in question. So here's a close-up of the fragment itself. As you can see, it's a lot of it is very difficult to read, especially where these words appear. So most of the time we like to look at the fragments in infrared It helps to sharpen up the text quite a bit. But even in the infrared, it's very, very difficult to read. So what I've done is inverted the picture, which I think sharpens up the text quite a bit. It makes it more obvious, I think, to see. Now, the line in question, yeah, you can see my cursor here. So the line in question, I'll just point it out here, is right here. This is it here, just above my cursor. And what I've done here is I have sharpened up the letters themselves so people can see them. So here is the Kof, Aleph, Resh, Vav. Sure looks like a Vav. And in these ancient manuscripts, some of the letters, distinguishing the difference between them is not clear. The letter Yod and the letter Vav are two of those letters where it's oftentimes not clear whether it's a Vav or a Yod. In this manuscript, it's usually pretty clear, but I would say not always. So that's like a lion or they dug, I guess. And then the next word here is Yod Dalet, Yod. That's the word hand. And at this point, it gets difficult to read the text. But what the scholars have seen is this. They've seen another Yod, but this one is really long. It looks more, to my eye, like the letter Vav that appears on the previous word. And that raises some questions for me right away. And then they've seen this, which they've understood to be the letter Hey, and then followed by and my feet. So there are problems here, though, especially with that last word, and my feet, just because there's not much there that you can see. So something that I've done is I've gone back and I've looked at this a little bit more clearly. Where my cursor is right now, you can actually see a letter there. And to my
Kind of?
eye, you can. Yeah, you kind of can. And to my eye, and if you can
Yeah,
read
it's
Hebrew,
very, very faint. Yeah.
it is very faint. I wonder if
Mm.
I can zoom in on it.
If I
Let's see.
remember the original, it's
Nope,
also
nope, nope.
smudged or torn a bit
What do you mean?
right around there. Oh, just before all
It's
the
like a gimbal.
inversion.
Yeah, it looks like it looks like
what
there's
what
burn
did you
marks.
say, Isaac?
I said it looks like a gimbal.
Doesn't it? There it is. I've zoomed in on
Yes.
it. That looks like a Gimel to me.
Hmm.
And up here, that looks like it could be a Lamed. You can kind of see the shape there, right?
Okay, that's
So,
really, really faint.
pardon?
That's very, very faint. I can't see
Right,
anything,
like
really.
that one's even harder.
That one's very faint. It looks clearer on my screen. So I'll just so we've got that. There's Yod. There's what's supposed to be another Yod. There's the Hey and Vodagli. So I think that letter is a Gimel for sure. So, and then I think the one beside it is probably a Lamed. And this is helpful because now we can fill out the rest of this to look like that. And that actually looks like the Masoretic text. And the thing that really draws my attention here, and I will try to use my cursor here to point this out for people. So
It's still
this-
always that stylistic Lamed, right?
Yeah,
that
I
goes like
just
all the way.
realized, yeah.
That one's always weird to me. I've seen it in other
Lamed is weird.
manuscripts.
yeah.
But if you look at like the history of like the Lamed shape and the script Lamed shape, how they changed and moved around,
Yeah.
it
it's pretty
makes
cool.
a lot of sense. And you can also see like in Latin L, quite obviously in that shape.
Oh yeah,
as well.
yeah.
It looks, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I wanted to bring that up in terms of the Latin letters that you see in older English when you have those Latin
Serif?
inscriptions on buildings, and a V is in place of a U, or antiquated forms of English where something like an exaggerated F shape
Like
was
a
used
longer
for a
S.
double S.
Yeah, long
Yeah.
S. Yeah.
But it was something like a handwriting F, but it was used for a double S. Are there similar variants in Hebrew in how it is written over the centuries?
In these scripts, yeah. I mean, there's
They vary a lot over time, the scripts
yeah,
themselves, and there are also
the
variant
scripts-
letters. Like
that's part of how
certain
we
letters are
date.
written.
That's part of how we date manuscripts, is by tracking the developments in the handwriting. It's actually the
Yeah.
entire way or most of it. So, so where you see my cursor pointing here, this is, and I'll say it at this point. This is supposed to be a vav, which you can see the letter right next to it here is a yod, and you can kind of see the difference. Like the yod looks smaller. There's like a more of a wedge shape to it. So, but now if I move over to this letter, this is also supposed to be a yod. We know that this has to be a yod, actually. It can't be any other letter because then the text just wouldn't make any sense. So we know that has to be a yod, and then that's a vav. And when I'm looking at these particular letters, I'm like, the distinction between the vav and the yod, even on this manuscript, is really not very clear. So I suspect that this is probably actually a yod. I think that this manuscript probably does actually read like a lion, my hands and my feet, and
Which matches the
not
Masoretic.
which matches the Masoretic text. And it's an easier explanation as well. Because again, this particular word here is just not like this as it appears on this manuscript. If it's Kaf, Aleph, Resh, Vav, that doesn't mean anything. It's an anomalous word that we don't know. If this is Kaf, Aleph, Resh, Yod, then yeah, that's just the Masoretic text. So my tendency with the manuscript evidence for this particular psalm is that, as usual, as is typical, evangelicals and apologists tend to misunderstand the evidence, overread the evidence, misrepresent the evidence. It's just not what you think it is. So that's my
I actually have a clarifying question further to that point.
Sure.
Of the scholars, the Dead Sea scholars, particularly those that advocate the other reading as being a possibly legitimate reading for the pierced or dug,
Yeah.
how many of them are Christians?
That's a good question. I mean, there's a lot of Jewish scholars who work on the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's probably, and I think within biblical studies, the ratio between Jewish scholars and Christian scholars working on the scrolls is I think more evenly split than in other areas of the Old Testament, where I think there's a lot more Christian scholars. That's my impression. That's not actual data. So yeah, I would say
I can
as
certainly
is
see
typical,
that.
most no,
Sorry,
sorry, what was
please
that?
continue.
No, I
Well,
was
I
just
was
going to
just
say,
saying I could hardly see a Jewish person advocating that strained reading.
yeah. And when they do, and when I do, like I have no problem. Well, no, I should say, and I should also point out that we do have a tiny handful of Hebrew manuscripts which do preserve, which do, you know, attest to like the Septuagint reading, Kaf Resh Vav, they dug. My explanation for this is always, I think the simplest explanation for this is that all of this resulted from a copyist's error at some point. Somebody at some point mistook this letter. Sorry, my cursor is just a little bit behind. Somebody mistook this letter, which is a yod, for a vav at some point in the transmission history. It's possible it happened even in this manuscript. And then when they recopied this manuscript, they copied the error. When the Septuagint translator, the Greek translator, and was working on this psalm, he already had a corrupted manuscript, or he himself made this same mistake and misread this letter. It's much easier, it's a much simpler explanation to just say scribes made mistakes when copying these texts, which is what resulted in the confusion that we have now with regards to what the original meaning, with the original wording of this text actually was. I continue to think that like a lion is the original reading, and I think there's a possibility that there was a missing verb there at some point in the history of the transmission. So
I could certainly see that, and it would hardly be the first time that a scribal error, especially mistaking two letters that look rather similar depending on the person's handwriting, might then end up being, you know, a misreading, a misunderstanding. It's, I think it's one of Bart Ehrman's classic sort of beginning intro to the dialogue to bring up a couple of the more amusing cases of scribal textual errors. I think the funniest one is where the guy gets the Luke genealogy wrong. I guess he's writing columns and it's or writing columns into rows or something. He's just completely checked out. It's 3 a.m. He's not even thinking anymore. And God ends up as the son of some, you know, minor character of no other note.
I have to wonder, since we have Kip here doing this kind of analysis, is it just Josh that does the Akkadian? Do you do cuneiform?
No, I started learning it. So I mean, I can read a little bit of it, but mine is very elementary.
Because it was an issue with the mathematics. I think with the Sumerian king list, and they were talking about how with the sexagesimal numbering system, which I guess is supposed to be drawn out like the Star of David on a clock face, where the base is 60, which seems odd. And when you count on your fingers, you don't count the ends of your fingers, you count the segments of your fingers, and they count differently than we do. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
But one of the things about the numbering system was that you have a base symbol, as I understand it, and you can clarify. You have a base symbol, and then there's another symbol like an accent, I guess an accent is the only word I can think of for this, that will highlight whether it should be taken up by 10 or a different mark to make it take down by 10. So you have to put the number 6, and then you have that mark to make 660, and then you have another mark to make, or maybe you're right. It's originally 60, and you can take it up to 600, or you can take it down to 6.
Yeah. So you're wondering if there's a corruption there, so to the point that the numbers are exaggerated or inflated by misreading.
It's really hard to understand, because there's a lot of there's times in the Bible when you divide the ages given, these big ridiculous ages, and even in the Sumerian king list, when you divide the ages given by 12, we're assuming that it's a lunar calendar year. You divide it by 12, and then the age is realistic. Or you can, in other cases, you can divide it by 10, because if they put the wrong type of hyphen, and we're just talking about a stylus that's being pushed
Right.
in play. So if it's the difference between a comma and a period, then that could easily be misread.
It could be. I don't think that's what's going on there, though.
Okay.
And I've written about this too in my book. I talk a little bit about what I think is actually happening in Genesis chapter 5 and in the Sumerian Kings List. And we have copies of the Sumerian Kings List in a variety of different artifacts, like manuscripts.
Okay.
Inscriptions, right? And it's extremely old. But then we have much later copies of this. We have a copy of the Sumerian Kings List in Berosus, who wrote a history of Babylon in the 3rd century BCE. And very interestingly, I'll just say there's a mathematical formula that's at work in the way the numbers are factored, and it's basically the number 60 squared and then multiplied by another number. It's consistent all the way through. And that is also repeated in the biblical numbering, but except a little bit more involved. It's the number 60 squared multiplied by 2 and then adding usually another figure. Now, without getting too deep into the weeds here, I'll just say that if you convert the ages, which are presented in years in Genesis chapter 5, into months, so 1 year equals 12 months, 5 years equals 60 months, so on and so forth. If you convert those into months, then the numbers actually look very close to what is represented in the Sumerian Kings List. And for people who don't know, like in the Sumerian Kings List, kings live for tens of thousands of years. The antediluvian kings, these are the kings before the flood. And this is part of the point, right? Part of the mythology is that in this time, this distant past time that is inaccessible even to the people who were writing in the distant past, it was almost like this magical world, right? Where things were vastly different than they are today, to the point that all these ancestors of ours in the great ages past, they lived for thousands and thousands of years, as opposed to just tens of years. So but when you do the conversion in Genesis chapter 5, it actually aligns almost precisely with the version of the Sumerian Kings List that was produced by Berosus, which is something that happened in the 3rd century BCE. So it's and there's one other interesting thing that happens in the Genesis 5 version. The Genesis 5 version appears also to be operating on a solar calendar as opposed to like a lunar calendar, which means that they have to make in. We know this because they would have to then make intercalations in order to bring the calendar in the calendars into alignment, right? And the intercalation that they're making is always on the basis of the number 7. So there's a lot of information that's embedded just into the math that goes into putting something together like that Genesis 5 genealogy. So it's like a promotion of the solar calendar, and it's also a promotion of the observance of the Sabbath, all just kind of embedded into the numbers for somebody with way too much time on his hands and probably too much money to sit around and actually figure out. It's like divine secrets, right? So
I asked an
Although
archaeologist. I
Oh.
asked an archaeologist this question way back around Y2K. I asked this question, and the archaeologist, I can't remember who it was, but their response, it was an online discussion, and it was their response was quite impatient. I'm glad they typed it out instead of speaking to me, because I could tell the tone of voice they were typing in. When I asked them to explain how do we figure out what the ages in the Bible really are, and do we divide by 10? Do we divide by 12? Do we take this into account? Whatever. And the answer was something along the lines of it's not that simple! Exclamation point. And there was a little bit more than that, but it just seemed to express how the frustration with how complicated it was and how simple I was, or something, or some combination thereof.
This is very convoluted, but at the same time, it does help me understand why the ancients regarded math as a form of magic, and
Like magic.
use. Yeah, well, I cast parabola.
And I like bringing this up
I wish that would have worked that way.
I like bringing this up to the young Earth creationists as to why they think that I mean, with Methuselah, for example, if I remember correctly, you divide by if you treat it like a lunar calendar, then suddenly he's 75 years old, something like that, and suddenly the ages are reasonable, right? And so I'm talking about. So here's where the problem was. This was before they invented the number 0, or something along these lines. But the fun thing about the argument is when you're trying to figure out why is the Sumerian king list, they talk about these people that lived for ruled for tens of thousands of years. That just gets absurd, especially when you think that the Earth is only 6,000 years old.
It is, but also I think these things are promoted in the popular imagination by a kind of sentimentality for the golden age of the past, which is something you see in all cultures and all peoples at all times. Again,
Most of those young Earth creationists will accept that the Sumerian king list is older than the Pentateuch. Right? This had to come before Moses.
Oh, yeah. No question.
Well, we know that to be literally true, but stop expecting rational consistency from young Earth creationists, sweet pea. It's just about maintaining the belief, and reality be damned. That's the only thing is involved. You just ignore, deny, Darvo, whatever you can. It's not logically consistent because it's not true. It's a defensive, visceral, reactive attitude to defend an idea that they don't have the courage to even fully understand themselves, because that would require complexity of thought that would bring it into doubt. So it's stop. They will not be sensible. Stop it.
Stop it. Yeah, just so like there are the version of the Sumerian kings list that I believe most scholars will refer to as kind of like the base text, the popularized version, is from the Weld Blundell Prism, which dates to 1800 BCE. There are, like I said, there's a lot of these, and there's older ones that are quite a bit more fragmentary. So and yeah, the Weld Blundell Prism is Akkadian. There is actual fragmented versions written in Sumerian. Yeah, there's discrepancies too, right? Like most of the time we talk about like 10 kings in the Sumerian king, like 10 antediluvian kings in the Sumerian kings list. And again, 10 antediluvian patriarchs in Genesis chapter 10. But there are possibly some versions with more, like 12 or even 8. And the other thing I also like to point out to people is that in the Sumerian kings list, the 7th ruler which is who is that? That's what's his name? It's either Ensipaziana or Enmendarana. Is kind of like the significant linchpin in the list, and I think the same holds for Enoch in the biblical text, who's the seventh from Adam, who lives for 365 years, which you'll recognize. It corresponds to how many days there are in a solar calendar, and for whom a whole bunch of mythology developed in the Second Temple period. So, in 200 BCE, and very much committed to this idea of the correctness of the solar calendar.
I could see that. It's interesting to think that the fact that we ended up on a solar versus a lunar calendar, despite the fact that it is possibly not the better overall, was this kind of propaganda woven into a lot of scripture. And look at the cute little kitty. I don't care. He deserves French.
I mean, one thing I could say about like the Jewish calendar, like it originally being lunar and how it had to adapt to the solar calendar was just very practical. You had these holidays that were supposed to happen on certain. You want to give it a date on the calendar, but if the calendar's lunar, it moves around, and the holidays are supposed to be associated with a specific season. For example, Passover is supposed to be in the spring. If you had a strictly lunar calendar, you wouldn't be able to say Passover is on this date of this month, because that month would move around. So they had to like create this lunar, solar lunar year, where you add a leap month every 4.5 years or whatever. There's a lot of calculations involved to keep it in line with the solar year.
It gets convoluted. Calendars always are.
Yeah, so that might be where it came from. Like we want to have festivals that relate to agriculture and seasons, but we also want to have a calendar that we can calculate. So it makes sense to use a solar calendar, which is easier to calculate.
Yeah.
But months, the
Then we
idea
end
of
up with
months, moons, comes from a
nonsense
lunar
like
calendar.
leap years. That's always, that's from a creationist perspective. I have to imagine that explaining why our calendars are such a mess is difficult.
The Gregorian
God
calendar
is a
perfect
dumbass.
and was done by a Christian.
Yeah.
Yeah, if the world was divinely designed, you would expect that 12 months would divide equally into a solar year.
Wouldn't it be nice?
Yeah.
If it did.
Yeah. Good luck with that. The amount of ridiculous ideas that have been contrived throughout the history of science, of all kinds of science, based on the assumption that God was intelligently designing the universe and would create harmony and structure within it that would make sense to us. It's unbelievable.
Like 360 days in a year. Wouldn't that be so nice and divine?
Yeah.
And I take the extra 5 days in sleep.
Okay, so I got some more comments to look over here. See, my unfinished journey says, "Hail, Arn and panel, and hail."
Arn, you have 2 above that.
Well, you missed the big stuff.
Yes.
Illyra the Free sent another 50 RN Rock gift memberships.
Wow.
No.
And after that, well, yes, but
it was 100.
There are
total.
2. She sent 100.
Oh, okay. I thought.
Wow.
Oh, okay. So this is actually the third one.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
and
This is
yet
Eerdmans.
another. So we're actually up to 150.
Shit.
Yeah.
Wow.
Alira, you're the
Alira.
best.
And again, thank you very much. And then let me see. Okay, so yeah, I've been Hail RNN panel and Hail technology assisted biblical criticism.
Yeah.
Right. And then my unfinished sock, who suspiciously always follows my unfinished journey, says,
Weird.
"Don't dig my hands and my feet. Like and share the stream instead." Yeah, I remember
Yes,
when
that
Homer-
sounds-
when Lawrence first mentioned that the common translation was actually that it wasn't biting or piercing, that it wasn't
Yeah.
piercing, that it was digging, like with a shovel. Or was it Kip
Mhm.
that said that? I can't remember which of you told me that. It was like 2-3 years ago, and who remembers?
It's probably Lawrence.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
And then
I was dealing with my cats. What? Are you talking
That
shit?
Karu. That Karu
Yeah.
should be.
No, you're being complimented. Relax.
Yeah. Yeah. It was you that told Aaron that Karu means dug rather than like piercing.
Oh, did I? Well,
I don't know if it was you or Kip. It was like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, like it. Oh, 2 or 3 years ago. Oh, damn. Okay.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can
I mean,
remember.
I noted that the Septuagint did use dug or gouged earlier, but yeah.
And then
in Hebrew, though, I think even it's like, yeah, like that's just it, right? Like there's plenty, like a lot of perfectly good Hebrew words to say stab, penetrate, puncture. Why on earth would anybody use karu for that? Like it just
they shoveled my hands and feet.
That's it. I particularly like, and that's my favorite way to understand it is the way my unfinished journey understands it.
Which is the next comment. Apologist says they dug my hands and feet. They sew my pierced hands and feet.
Saw.
I like they.
Yep.
Those are some nice looking hands and feet.
Groovy, man.
Yeah, I was gonna say like my unfinished sock. Like we dig your feet.
We dig it.
Oh God. Okay, no, we are not doing a foot fetish stream.
Right.
Oh my God. But
Yeah.
I find it really interesting the imagery you talked about very briefly at the beginning of this episode about hands being severed and a lion's particularly cutting off hands, because although lions may mutilate and maul in many different ways, that imagery specifically speaks to permanently disabling and disarming someone, because hands are used both for weapons and for tools. So you can't do that shit after a lion gets you, even if you survive. Probably. At very least, not as well.
Speaking of piercing hands and feet, I'm trying to coax my scorpion back into my hand so that I can put him up.
Yeah.
Oh,
I mean, people
don't
might have
get
noticed that
punctured.
this chapter mentions lions quite a lot.
A lot.
So it makes
Yes.
a lot of sense to just include a line there.
Yeah, it does.
And even if it reads kind of weird, there can be, other reasons. Whoa.
Success. I named
Don't
him
believe you're.
I named him Leopold.
He looks like a Sebastian to me, but
No,
Leopold
no,
was a
that's the
terrible
red
person,
one.
I think, isn't he?
Oh.
One of my
Benedict
favorite
Kraus.
one of the I read one commentator on this text suggested that the reason it's weird, the reason it reads strangely like a lion, my hands and my feet, is because the writer, oh look, they're playing. The writer was expressing like exasperation and urgency at the situation, and was trying to communicate that just basically through the like a lion, oh my God kind of thing, like my hands and my feet. It just yeah, Oh, it's
Plateau.
clever. But
I mean, if a lion is charging at you, you do not have time to fuck about. So get on it, God.
Do you have time to find out?
FAFL, motherfucker.
Okay. So we've finished with chapter 22.
Yes,
we
hopefully.
killed it.
We did it.
Tomer's so defeated over
Victory was
chapter
ours.
22.
Yeah,
Is
I
it-
feel
is
so
it-
bad for Tomer when
Is it because of all the
Yeah.
Jesus talk?
No, it's because I really want to move on.
Yeah. There's more than one verse in this chapter that Christians use, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They
Yeah,
used
the lot.
They used
Well,
a ton of them.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
mean, the other ones are like legit. As Lawrence pointed out, the writers of the New Testament were writing the Passion narrative with Psalm 22 in front of them, and providing, correspondences between the experiences of Jesus and what they saw in this text. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
The
Absolutely.
only
It's very
interesting
contrived.
and in the first century, they would have already, like, I mean, the Christians at least, they already loved like the suffering servant idea in Isaiah, so they use that as a proof text as well. So they definitely tied this in with that.
the
in
only
Jesus'
interesting
perspective.
commentary on chapter 20, I would say, like from Jewish perspective, is if you kind of read this chapter, you could argue that, because of the traditional idea that this is supposed to be written around the time of David, or even by David himself, that this is talking about David's life. But even Jewish commentators like Rashi in the medieval times, he was like, this seems to be talking about the exile, the Babylonian exile, and he was like, oh yeah, David was writing prophetically about the future here, but not the Christian way where he's writing prophetically about Jesus. He's writing prophetically about the Jewish people going to Babylonia.
Are we
God, it's
then moving
hilarious.
on to 23?
Yeah.
oh wait, that's a famous psalm too.
Oh, yes, it is.
Yeah, it is.
Half dozen verses that I've heard repeated separately so many times.
Thing is,
Oh, it is famous in Jewish literature as well, because it's in the Sabbath blessing.
It's also there's a lot of songs on this one.
Feast, yes.
yeah.
I mean that I basically memorized it at a point in my youth because because they say it a lot.
Go ahead, Tomer. From memory.
Okay. No, not from memory. Just like
From memory.
No.
Who has it
I was a
memorized
child.
here?
I don't.
In the Hebrew, but it's like.
No, I have the.
But I
English
remember,
memorized.
I remember how it is like said. For at least when you do it, you speak it quickly because you want.
Yeah, I don't think I can
fucking
say it by heart. I can read it very fast because I like my muscle memory.
Basically, that's how you said that in.
Fair.
But that is not the
Jews-
spirit of this.
I mean,
Jews have no chill.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The Lord
yeah,
is
just
my
do it.
shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk the darkest valley, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord my whole life long.
So
See, it takes longer to say it in English than Hebrew.
So it should be pretty clear why this is such a popular psalm. It's honestly very like it is super devotional and it's very vague and can be applied to a lot of situations.
It's
Uh,
very comforting liturgically.
sure, yeah,
Like
and
you could use it in a devotional sense very easily
Mhm.
anytime you feel overwhelmed or in need of direction or consolation, or you know, we can all think of 100,000 things happening at this very minute that we'd be like, that would be a nice thing to feel right now because the world is on fire.
Right. Yeah, I totally get that. Uh, so like because like this to me, it's like, you know what, this is fairly self-explanatory. But I think that the one interesting note I had, and this is again mostly just for my studies, in verse 4 there, the darkest valley, otherwise as the valley of the shadow of death. Um, and this so the word that's used here is tsalmot, and it is often
Talmabit.
translated, well, sure, yeah, in the form, but the
Talmavet.
base word. um and the it's often translated as the shadow of death in like, you know, older versions, but uh it could also be a superlative of darkness, so like the darkest darkness, the darkest darkness, which is why the darkest valley is a pretty fair translation. And that was argued by Thomas, by what was his name, D Winton Thomas, or D Winston Thomas, or something like that.
The shadow
In
of death is an appropriate poetic form for that, though. Like it's because it's very menacing.
Right, yeah, it is.
Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me.
Yeah, and that wasn't the.
Yeah.
I remember there was a T-shirt that I saw in the '80s. The biker was wearing. Lo, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of the death, I shall fear no evil, for I am the baddest motherfucker in the valley.
Yeah.
So not really in the spirit of the psalm, is it?
In fairness, children have also found good use for it, particularly when they're at that age where they will not learn table manners. And some have been sent like, okay, you have to go eat on your own until you learn to stop, you know, acting like you're raised by wolves. And there's many a story of a child going, Lord, thank you for this meal you have prepared in the presence of mine enemies. That was one I heard a couple times.
I do have the paper pulled up here. It was from D Winton Thomas, Salmot in the Old Testament. It's from 1962, but I think he did a pretty good job there. It's also used to describe Sheol in Job 10:21. I think it's used a few other times too, but to me it's just because I've been doing like so much work on like this darkness motif, or the motif of divine darkness. It was very interesting to me that they use somewhat here, and I think there's also a was it Akkadian or Sumerian? I forget which one it was, but there's a cognate from Sumerian or Akkadian. I have to go back and check which.
Really?
That yes. But it was Gelmot or something like that. Yeah, but there is a cognate.
I'm just I was gonna point out,
possible relation to Gelmot.
Yeah, Thomas actually got cited in the Hebrew Aramaic lexicon for this entry.
I'm sure he did. Yeah, because it was a very good. It's a good paper.
So the suggestion here is that probably derived from folk etymology of tzal, in combination with mawat. Mawat on its own means death. The Septuagint translates skia thanato, dark death. So yeah, no, and it has here. I'm just looking at the entry here. It has gloom, and in parentheses it says deeper than choshek, which is darkness.
Yes. Although I think
An
Hoshek and
impenetrable gloom.
yes, although I think that both Hoshek and Sama were
Hoshek.
used to describe Sheol. But yeah, these are all different like words that I've been diving into quite a lot, like the ways that they describe darkness, and like if there's any like, and there for some of them there is like theological significance, as demonstrated by Thomas's paper. But I think there's more to it. I think he just scratched the surface of it. But
Hmm.
The
anyways, go ahead,
spiritual
guys.
and the mundane were not distinct in the way we think of them now, especially in cases like this, in a liturgical worship hymn where you're crying out for comfort, spiritual darkness and trauma and all of that. Like it's all one sense, and there's a sense of greater foreboding powers that are affecting you in ways, some of which you see, some of which you may not. And that's not entirely false, just not in the way it was perhaps conceptualized by the religious.
Okay, so Kraus writes that Psalms 23 belongs to the form group of prayer songs. He notes that the expressions of trust in Psalms 23 caused some to call it a song of trust, like Gunkel and Beglich, and thus classify it as a lament of an individual. He writes, however, that the confessional formulations of verses 2 and 3 tend to move the prayer song near the song of thanksgiving uttered by an individual. That Psalms 23 is a prayer song is evident in verses 4 forward, in the address to Yahweh. Craigie notes the variety of views regarding the sending of the psalm. Morgenstern suggested that the psalm was, quote, a pious Jew's expression of faith and confidence in the Lord, end quote. Vogt proposed that the psalm was part of a liturgical ritual of thanksgiving, of which a sacrificial banquet was a part. This view is favored by Kraus, who writes that after the judgment of God has been rendered and the acquittal declaring the falsely accused to be tzaddik has been published, a banquet in connection with an offering takes place, at which obviously also the enemies, i.e. the persecutors and accusers, take part. Milne saw an exilic context in the psalm, with the shepherd metaphor providing hope for an exiled community cut off from home and temple. And Craigie comments, quote, the sheer diversity of views is a clear indication of the most fundamental problem with respect to the interpretation of the psalm. It is that the language of the psalm is not sufficiently explicit to establish beyond dispute its original sense and setting. Thus, several of the various interpretations noted above are plausible, but several also go beyond the clear evidence of the psalm. For example, royal interpretations, liturgical interpretations, or exilic interpretations. They are not thereby wrong, merely hypothetical. It is proposed that the psalm must be interpreted as a psalm of confidence in the context of some ritual or the context of thanksgiving, without being so specific as Vogt. Such a setting is implied in verses 5 and 6, though the possibility of a non-cultic interpretation such as that of Morgenstern remains open. It is presumed that initially the psalm was an individual psalm, utilized in such a setting, though later in its history it may well have come to function as a communal psalm. That's it.
That's valid. I feel like I could see it being used more as an individual psalm initially, at least. Because, well, faith was far more communal and ritualistic and, the public sacrifices and things. There has always been a personal element to devotion. And part of the mythos of David is this idea of him being a shepherd, and that this was the reason he was chosen to be a shepherd over my people Israel. It's a very earthy image. It's meant to be a comforting image, but it's an image drawn from the past, that the people of Israel began as these people traveling around with flocks and herds and having to care for them because that was their livelihood. That was, without it, they would starve. So there's a real practical care and concern there too, as well as a sentimental element.
So unless I don't know,
I
Kip,
am
Isaac,
not, I don't
anyone?
think we can go on to another one.
You what?
Were you closing out? Were you going to suggest?
Yeah, because I am very hungry. I need food.
I need to go too.
I'm supposed to be at a birthday party for a 5 becoming 6-year-old.
Oh,
Well, you
wow.
can't hold up a little baby.
Yeah.
Well, actually, he can quite easily.
Do you do?
Ha
Aaron, do you do the thing
ha.
where you hold the baby in the palm of your hand while they're standing? You do that?
As a matter of fact, I
Imagine-
might be confused. It might be the other one, the even smaller one. The
Okay, well, you should definitely figure that out before you go.
yeah.
which child is having the birthday?
Happy birthday! Here's your Polly Pocket.
Yeah. Anyway, if so we will be doing what is it? We did 22, we did 23. We're going to do 24.
Yes.
24.
24%.
Yes.
I will make note of that. Right, and with nothing else more to say.
Oh, we got a lot.
Yeah. Well,
so
before
one
we
thing
go
you
to
should
that, Arn, you have one last thing to read out.
Yeah, I see that.
Deliver the Free sent 50 RN gift memberships, bringing us to a total of 200.
That's
for
insane. Wow.
That is crazy. Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
Okay, I asked this once before.
Girl!
I asked this once before as like a half joke, but now I'm gonna actually ask, like, what do you do for work? Because this is money. This is real money.
Yeah, I just want to ask why. Why? Just why? Like,
Toma,
like,
she
it's-
appreciates your commentary very much.
I mean, I would have used my money for stuff, more important stuff. I'm sorry to say.
You know.
What could be more important than an Arn gift membership? Get out of here, Tom.
Buying books, eating
Oh.
something,
That is true.
having a
Books are
fucking
free.
life, going to fucking parties. I don't know. Why?
Yeah, use that money on drugs.
That's what Homer is saying.
I'm just being the rational. Am I the only rational person here?
Yeah, you're the one who walks up to a beggar and hands him a bunch of money and says, "Here, go buy alcohol and drugs."
Right, yeah. And you know what? More power to you. Yeah.
Oh wow.
So
She said what she does.
research.
Yeah, just put it in the chat.
Vague, but that's fine.
I just saw that.
Good for you.
All right. So, what else did we need to
Drug
say?
research.
Lauren?
Let's do it.
What you absolutely have to do is join the Behold Discord. And I need to hear a
Behold!
Very good.
Behold.
Oh, I saw that Peter put up the our Behold spray can too that we had on the show. That's pretty good.
Ooh.
Yeah, you see that right up there? We
What's that?
found that's like, I don't even know exactly what it is. I don't know. It's like a bug spray or something like that.
It's
But
it's a
we
furniture
found,
cleaner, Lawrence.
furniture cleaner. Okay.
Yes.
See, I didn't even know, but we had it. We had
I
it
remember that
on
now.
our table for basically like the whole show, and yeah,
And
it
you
was,
don't anymore.
It's nice that you put that in there.
You
No,
don't
not anymore because of the flood. But
buy a new
make
one.
sure to join the Discord. And,
Ask Arn to
Yes,
pay
you
for
know,
it out of the memberships.
Do you know what
Right. Yeah. And
the UK equivalent of Behold is pledge?
oh well,
Yeah.
we have Pledge too, but
Okay.
yeah. It was just something we
Funny, I don't know
found.
what the-
It was
Because
just like
Jesus was a carpenter.
right. Yeah. We have we just found it at the studio, honestly. So it was a nice little find. But the second thing is subscribe to the Behold Network, the only network where you behold. And that's the feeling I have to do. And we can sign off with Kip. Kip,
What
why
am I
don't you
doing?
exactly. Why don't you tell the people what you're doing, what you're up to, and where they can find and follow you and stalk you?
Well, that's nice of you. I like it when people stalk me.
Yeah.
So I'm a biblical scholar and a specialist in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and I do regular content on YouTube weekly, every Thursday night from for like an hour from 5 to 6 Pacific or 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock Eastern. I read the Hebrew text with a guest. Tomer's been on my channel reading Hebrew text with me.
Nice.
It's fun.
Yes.
So we
Yeah.
do
That does
that
sound
every
fun.
Thursday. And then I usually do a live stream on Friday covering some shenanigans or bullshit produced by YouTube apologists. But like to take those moments to do a lot of teaching as well. Like for example, yesterday I did a stream where I looked at a segment of an awful video by an even worse person named Ali Beth Stuckey, who wanted to talk about, you know, the biblical view of immigration. So I used that as an opportunity to work through how to understand the meaning of a lot of these texts in the Hebrew Bible that feature the stranger or the outsider or the landed the landed immigrant, really. So it's pretty interesting, right? Like, because you know the Hebrew Bible is a collection of all sorts of texts that were developed over a long period of time, and scholars can actually track, you know, some of these developments just by reading the literature. And it's all very lots of this stuff is all just very interesting to me, and some people seem to like it too. So
That
Okay.
sounds
A
interesting.
tiny child is having a birthday.
go.
Okay, go have fun with birthday and child. And we're glad to see
Everyone.
Tomer back and safe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Good night, everybody.
Bye.